Okay, welcome to Chapter 3, Section 3. We're going to continue from the last section where we updated our app on Heroku and did some database troubleshooting. Now I want to create a controller. I want to show you how to create a controller and maybe some views. And I have my server running, I have my page up, my local page, and I have my directory open. Now if we go in the app directory, this is where we're going to have our content generated. We're going to generate a post controller for our blog. Okay, so we did the home controller, and for every controller there's usually a view. It's very important that you understand this structure. So we have a home controller. If we go in our views, we have a home folder, and then in there we'll have our index view. Okay, and for the home controller, this is all we need. We're going to have, because there's only one home page. Our posts view, we'll have a lot of post views. We'll have the add post view, just the regular display view. We'll have a posts, a list of all our posts for a view. So now let's go into the command line and make sure you're in this directory. Make sure you're in the sites/myrubyblog directory, or you're not going to be able to do anything in Rails. Okay, so now what we want to do is use the generate command. Okay, but we can also just use Rails G, which is short for generate. So you can do that if you want. So I am going to generate a controller called posts. Now this has to be plural. Controllers should always be plural. Models, however, should be singular. So we'll have the post model with the posts controller. And you can go and you can see that it created our post controller, and it also created some tests if we want to run tests on the controller. So now if we go over to the app folder and we go in controllers, you'll see it created a post controller.ruby file. So this, if we open this, there shouldn't be anything really in it aside from the class. So we went over classes and objects in chapter 2 when we went over the Ruby programming language, and this is just a class called post controller, and it's very conventional. You need to have a capital P. This is actually called camel case. Okay, if we had it like this, like some programs do, that would be snake case. So we want to keep the generated name, and this, if you remember, just means that it's inheriting from another class. So this controller is inheriting everything from application controller, which comes with Rails by default, which has different methods and properties that we can use in our post controller. All right. Now the way we're doing things here isn't the quickest and easiest way, but I'm doing it for the sake of learning, because you can actually generate a controller and a model and a view at the same time if you wanted to. You could also use what's called scaffolding, which will actually create everything for you, including the database, tables, and pretty much everything. And I'm going to go over scaffolding in a future section, in a future chapter, but I didn't want to use just that as the way we create our blog. So just so you could learn, just so you can learn more. But we will go over scaffolding, and what we'll do is probably have another side project, not really a project, but just like another app, just to show you how scaffolding and some other techniques, because sometimes you can't do both in the same project. And I should mention it, if you don't already know, that this is pure Ruby code. Okay, this isn't any kind of HTML or any other kind of programming. It's strictly Ruby. The view files have HTML in them, but the controllers will have, generally will just have Ruby code. So in the controller, we want to create an action or multiple actions. And an action is just a method. Like we went over in Chapter 2, a class, an object class can have methods. It can have properties that we define as well as methods. So there's 7 actions in Rails. The index action is basically like the root action, where it'll display all our posts for us. So just by defining the index action, we'll be able to use it. So we want to do def and then index and then end. So we declared our action. Is this right? This should be spaced out. So we have an index action inside our post controller. And there's other actions like edit, which would be when we edit a post. Show, I think show is when we're looking at just one post. There's new, create, destroy. Those are all actions for our controllers that we can use. So the next thing to do would be to create a view, because our post controller has no views. If we go to My Ruby blog and then to app and then views, what it did do is generate a posts folder for the controller. So if you generate any kind of controller, it's going to create a folder with that name, just like we created the home controller. So you can generate views at the same time as you generate a controller. I guess I should show you what that would look like. So we could do like Rails G for generate, controller, posts, and we could have said new, and then you can add as many as you want with a space. We could add an edit controller, view, and so on. But we didn't do that, so the other way we can do it is just go in the post folder and create a new file. So we'll say a new text document, and we're going to name that index.html.erb. So all your view files will have this extension. They'll have the HTML with ERB tacked on to the end of it. And ERB just stands for Embedded Ruby. So let's open up the index view. Remember, it's the index. Oh, let me change my extension. By default, it's opening in regular Notepad, but I want to have it open in Notepad++. Alright, so we're in our view file. Remember, this is the index view of the post controller. And in the view files, we'd have HTML, we can embed JavaScript and CSS, and we can also use blocks of Ruby code, which will generally come from the controller. Or the controller will get it from the model and then pass it to this view. So for now, let's just make an h1 tag and just say blog posts. So that's pure HTML. It's a simple heading. And let's create a paragraph. Actually, let's just simulate a blog a little bit. We'll say sample post 1, and that'll be in an h3 tag. And then alright, and let's actually create one more. We'll do an HR here. Obviously, this content, when we're done, the title and text, it's obviously going to be dynamic, coming in from the database, but I'm just doing this just so we can see what it looks like. Alright, so let's save that. So in order to use the 7 routes that I explained earlier, the index, new, well, let me get out of here, create, destroy, we need to create a resource. We need to create a route for our post controller. So go into your MyRuby blog directory and go into config and then routes. So in order for us to use the URL structure to go to /posts, /post edit, show, to use those 7 actions that I talked about earlier, we need to claim our resource. So we would just want to go and type in resources, and then a colon, and then posts, and then just save that file and exit. So now let's restart the server by going to the command line where the server is running and press Control-C, and then just start it again with Rails S, and then you should be able to go to our page, and you should be able to go to /posts, and there it is. There's the view, the index view of the post controller, which we created here. So the next step would be to go and create a model and actually make this content dynamic as opposed to just static text.